cool games out there. It's very exciting. When they asked me to give a talk, I wasn't sure what to talk about. I had to think about it a little bit. And I thought I would kind of give some of my recent thoughts about where things are going with touch gaming. Hands up anybody here who's thinking about working with any kind of touch gaming, right? So there's a lot of people are doing that. And touch gaming is relatively new. It's not something that we were doing, even 10 years ago. But it swept the world so completely, so fast that I think it really deserves some thinking about. So I'm going to give you some of my thoughts about sort of the past, present, and future of touch gaming. One thing lots of people point out is, wow, have you noticed the kids today, these little kids, 2-year-olds, they can use the iPad. That must be because kids are different today. No, kids are not different today. Kids are the same as they always have been. There's just something very, very special about this kind of touch gaming. And I think I can explain what that is if you watch this video here. So just reflect on this for a minute. No, there's no tutorial for this frog. Right? You didn't need any of that. Right, so that's kind of funny, but man, have you ever seen a frog play any other video games? No, like before touch gaming, animals really weren't playing the video games, and then suddenly they can. And I think that is at the heart of what's so powerful about touch. So I sometimes think of it this way. So when we first invented computing about 50 years ago, it was all based on symbolic manipulation. That's what computing was. All computing interfaces were about manipulating symbols, and we as a human race have been manipulating symbols for about 3,000 years. So that little box right there at the top, that represents how long we've been manipulating symbols. Then some smart guys invented the mouse, and suddenly we moved from computing that was all about manipulating symbols into computing that was about tool use. Now we as the human race have been doing tool use a little longer. So if that's symbolic logic, 3,000 years, this much larger box represents 3 million years of tool use. And you can see that, of course, the mouse took over, because that's just so much more powerful. But when you start to get into touch, touch goes way back before tool use. Touch is a bigger box. 300 million years we've been touching things and they've been responding. Way older than human beings. You could take that game back 300 million years ago and frogs could play it back then. Right? And that's what's powerful about touch, is that, our brain is in sections kind of going backwards towards this kind of old reptilian brain. And the things that work with touch, because of the tight feedback loop, work with the most primitive parts of our brains. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. One of the things I often say is it's not enough to understand technology if you want to figure out where things are really going. You need to also understand psychology. And if you understand both of these, then you know exactly what's going to happen. If you can understand the technology and understand the psychology, you can predict how things are going to go down, because you know how it's going to work. And usually when we fail, it's not because we didn't understand the technology, it's usually because we didn't understand the psychology. So I want to talk a little bit today about the psychology of touch, because it's swept up on us so fast that I don't think we understand it very well at all. So what are some things we know about touch? Well, some people may have heard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, that IQ doesn't really mean much on its own, that really there are 8 kinds of intelligence, and one of the ones that he points out as a type of intelligence is this kind of bodily kinesthetic intelligence, which is very much about touch. And so that's kind of interesting, that touch can be a kind of intelligence. I find this really interesting. We have a hard time remembering lists of things. It's one of the things human beings are really bad at. If I give you a list of, even 10 or 15 numbers, you have a hard time remembering them. But if you map them to different parts of your body, you can remember them fairly easily. There's something about the way touch and the body are connected to memory, which is interesting. And touch is just incredibly complicated. We talk about it as if, oh yeah, there's sight and there's smell and there's touch. But really, touch is very rich and very complicated. It's not just one thing, right? So first of all, you have about 5 million touch sensors all over your body. That's incredible. And they're not just one kind. You've got pain sensors, you've got pressure sensors, you've got separate cold sensors, you've got separate heat sensors. Then you've got ones that are all about pressure and texture. You've got ones that are all about balance. You've got special ones about vibration. There's an incredible amount of variety in the way that touch works. So, for example, at some point, I learned to do this. Okay? Now, the way I learned it is I saw a guy, and he was doing it, and I said, that's really cool. How do you do that? And he said, well, you kind of put your finger there, and you make small circles, and you practice. And I was like, you suck. That's but I practiced and practiced, and I learned it. And then people started coming up to me, and they would say, hey, how do you do that? And I'd say, you make small circles and you practice. And they'd say, but what about when my hand gets like way out to the side? What do I do? And I'd say, I think you slow down. I think your hand sort of tilts to one side a little bit. But I don't really know, because I don't have anything to do with it. It just happened. And people say, oh, well, it's hand-eye coordination. I'm like, are you sure? Because I don't think the eyes really have anything to do with this. This is like a 100% touch-based operation. But I can't really say how it works. And there's another, like Braille. People who can read Braille, they can absorb 10 to 20 letters per second through their fingers. It's hard to imagine that touch can work that well, but it can. And think about pinch zoom. 3-year-olds find pinch zoom incredibly intuitive. There is nothing in the real world that works like pinch zoom. But somehow it's like, yep, bigger. And it just, yeah, okay, I guess so. It just works. Everybody gets that. And anybody who's tried to make 3D games using the tablet, it's so frustrating, because you have all these really hard questions about where should you put the controls. Should I have a virtual joystick? Do I want to put the buttons all up and down the sides? And then you have these weird questions like, well, I can have it where I hold it like this and I'm using my hands here, and then I swipe, but it's really awkward to let go of one hand and then swipe, unless it's in your lap. We're still figuring out what the right set of controls are. Everybody who sits down and tries to make a 3D game on tablets is wrestling with these things, and the best games find clever new interfaces. So we're still learning and experimenting, trying to figure out what's right. the thing about touch is so much of it is really about our subconscious mind. Because touch is very primal and it's very subconscious, which means the conscious mind is bad at thinking about it. And it really makes me believe that there are lots more opportunities for great new touch interfaces that people haven't thought of yet because we're not used to thinking subconsciously that way. And I think that's partly why it took kind of a crazy guy whose defining life experience was an LSD trip in order to show us how important that touch really is. But it's not like touch computing is new. I remember in, I think I was 1981, taking a tour of the Hewlett-Packard factory where they had the new touchscreen personal computer. Here it is, right here, touch-based computing, back in the 80s. And this was a tremendous flop. This was before the mouse even. And this thing didn't work out. It was not popular at all. And the reason seems to be not so much that touch is bad, but that holding your arm up all the time gets really heavy. And nobody told Tom Cruise that in Minority Report, but it's really, really true. Is that when you have to do that with your arm all the time, you just get so sick of it, and you don't want to do it. And this is an ongoing problem that people keep rediscovering. And that's why the iPad is like, oh, we'll put it down here. Oh, okay, now it's okay. When it's up here, oh, when it's down here, oh, this is actually quite nice. Now, then we started to see touch-based computing in kiosks and things, ATMs and that sort of thing. And sure, you got the heavy arm problem, but you're not there very long. So it doesn't matter. And it was nice that these things were so intuitive, and those worked out pretty well. Then we had this kind of touch-based computing. Who remembers this? Palm Pilot, yes. And look, there's the special graffiti alphabet. Did anybody here have the Palm Pilot? Yes. Who here learned graffiti? Yes. Who still uses it today? Nobody. Nobody. Yeah, you had to learn this whole secret cryptic language. Yeah. And this gets into the question of what's the future of the stylus? Because the iPad seems to think, no, you shouldn't have a stylus. That's really bad. But we had a stylus with this device. And then we had a stylus with this device. Do people remember when the Nintendo DS came out? Everyone was like, that's the worst thing I've ever seen. 2 screens, stupid. Why do I need 2 screens? And then really a little pencil. I'm gonna play video games with a little pencil. No, that's really stupid, is what everyone said, and then Nintendo proceeded to crush all the competition because it turns out people like the little pencil quite well. And so it was sort of surprising when the round phones that involved touch didn't have the little pencil at all. They all started using the finger. You can use the finger with the DS, but people don't. They tend to use the little pencil, which is weird to think about. So then you started having stuff like, you know, Microsoft started getting on the bandwagon. Hey, we got touch integrated on our laptops, and it uses a pencil because we think pencils are cool. Do people know the story of how the iPad actually happened? It's really stupid. So one of the engineers at Microsoft was good friends with Steve Jobs and had Steve Jobs over for dinner. And he's saying, Steve, you wouldn't believe what we're doing at Microsoft. It's so cool. It's going to make you guys at Apple look like chumps. Steve's like, whatever, I don't care. And the guy says, no, really, it's going to be touch-based computing using a pen. Oh, pen-based computing, it's the thing. It's amazing. Steve's like, pen-based computing is dumb. He said, no, you don't. Wait till you see it. It's so great. Oh, man, you guys are going to be... And Steve's like, you know, I've had enough. And he goes to work the next day and he says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get some touch-based computing going on. It's not going to use a pen. And they got it going, and they made the iPad, and they crushed these guys. Because this stuff's been out for a while. Now, of course, you'll notice it has the heavy arm problem. Who here has a laptop that uses a pen? Anybody? Right? Who here uses the pen every day with the laptop? Yeah, nobody, right? Very few people, and mostly because it's the heavy arm problem, which is kind of crazy. Now, the thing to think about, one of the quotes Steve Jobs used to have was, "I don't need a stylus. Why shouldn't you have a stylus? God gave you 10 styluses. You don't need any more," right? That's kind of like saying, yeah, Leonardo, when he did the Mona Lisa, should have done finger paint. That would have been better. But artists don't do finger paint. Not mostly. Mostly they use brushes. Why? And they have the heavy arm problem. They've been dealing with it a long time. Their arms get quite tired. They do all kinds of things. But why did they use brushes? The reason is the 3-finger grip. There's power in the 3-finger grip. There's this muscular control of this little triangle of 3 fingers pressing against each other. It can do things that you can't do with just a mouse moving your arm. And that was part of the power of the DS. I got this fine-grained control that was really nice. And it sort of opens this question of like, what is the future of the 3-finger grip? Because they're not teaching cursive writing in the schools anymore like they used to. Do they still teach it here in Scotland?
Yes.
Cursive writing in the schools, they still do. In America, they're like, forget that stuff. We don't need that anymore. And I worry because people who draw, they learn to draw by learning to make those little curvy shapes with the little 3-finger grip. Is the 3-finger grip going to go away? And what will that mean for the future of art? I'm not quite sure. All right, well, then Microsoft got on board and said, hey, no, now we've got touch-based laptops, and you can touch them, and they're all touchable. And oh, my arms are so heavy. They're so heavy. Yeah. Anyway. Then you got the virtual keyboards. Because that's the reason you got the heavy arms, is because you got to have that keyboard there. Because you need the keyboard. Who here prefers a virtual keyboard? Few people. Most people. Who here hates a virtual keyboard? Most people are like, virtual keyboards, I hate those virtual keyboards. But the thing about virtual keyboards is kind of funny. People who are good at typing hate the virtual keyboard. If you're bad at typing, because you just never learned it that well, virtual keyboard is fine. You're just hunting and pecking, and it's right there, and it's super convenient, and it's fine. And one of the things I'm starting to see is they're not teaching typing in the schools like they used to. More and more schools are saying, kids are already on computers all the time. We don't need to teach them how to type. And so we're seeing this generation of kids who are like just hunting and pecking, which means they don't really care about a regular keyboard, and maybe they like the virtual keyboard better, which seems weird to me. Can I point out something very strange about the Apple virtual keyboard? It's in the middle here. Here, let me zoom in. Do you notice on the F and the J? Do you see those lines? Do you know what that is? Those are supposed to be the bumps so you can find the home row with your fingers by touch. Someone submit a bug, they don't work. Maybe that's an iPad 5 feature, I don't know, but that blew my mind that those are just there. I can't even use the keyboard anymore because I just stare and stare. Why did you put those there? So it's a question, what's the future of touch typing? Are we still going to have keyboards for fast typing? Are we going to switch to all virtual keyboards all the time? We'll see. It could be that we get a situation where keyboards are for people who do a lot of composition. Most people who are just texting and stuff, they don't really need a keyboard. If you're doing serious composition, you might want a keyboard. Just like if you're doing serious art, you want to be all about the 3-finger grip, and you want to be really good with that. So we may see kind of a shift that way. I do feel pretty certain that people are going to continue to want some kind of touch-based interface for typing, something involving real tactility and not the virtual stuff, because you just don't get the good feedback. So let's talk about where touch stuff is going, because we're having a generation of kids right now who are raised, like, as far as they know, this stuff's always been there, right? The iPad and all that, that's always been there. Touch-based computing, yes, of course, that's what I'm going to have. And we're seeing it, tablets are going to take over the schools. Textbooks are going to go away, and they're going to be replaced very quickly with tablets because they are cheaper. Schools don't change things quickly unless it's about being cheap. And tablets are cheaper than books. And so the tablets are going to come avalanching into the schools. And weirdly, it's going to be happening right at a time when we've got a generation of kids who've been raised with the iPad and with touch-based tablets. And they're going to be so used to just very, very touch-oriented interfaces. So where are touch interfaces going next? Well, here's the thing. I don't know if people have seen this. This is the leap motion. Let's take a quick look at this. So this, your hands are kind of floating in the air there, and you can do your pinch zoom, and you can play Fruit Ninja with your finger. And gee, my arm is getting heavy. It's I'm not quite sure about the future of the leap motion and quite what it's for. It works really well as long as you don't turn your hands sideways. But there's something there, but it makes me nervous because it's not really touch. You're just waving your fingers in space. You're not touching anything. And that makes me nervous because you're wasting what we're good at when we touch things. You're not getting that feedback. Then we got things like the Tactus. This is really weird. This is a touch surface that can deform itself to create like little bumps will come up for the keys, so you'll actually get some kind of touch-based platform. So your flat platform won't be flat anymore. It'll have bumps in it, and they're talking about a programmable one, so they can program different shapes to pop up in different places. Maybe that's a thing. I'm not sure about that. Even weirder, you've got the Senseg system that uses electromagnetic fields so that when you run your finger across it, you can feel different textures. They can make it feel rough, or they can make it feel smooth. And the idea would be that as you move your finger across and you get to the edge of a button or something, you could feel like where the edges of the interface are. It's pretty cool, but the problem is it only works when your finger's in motion. So I'm not quite sure how much we're really going to use that technology. The place I think touch is going to really start to matter is when it comes to head-mounted displays. I'm very bullish on the notion that head-mounted displays are going to come into the home. I would predict that by the year 2020, we're going to see very widespread use of head-mounted displays in the home. And when you look at, when people talk about, hey, we're making cool virtual reality, yeah, you always got the helmet, but you've always also got the gloves. And because people want to reach out and touch that virtual world. And I think that's going to be very important because we like touching things. And so how is that possible? How is that going to happen? Well, here's one way it could happen. This is from Disney's research lab. Let's check this out.
We introduce Aerial, a new haptic technology designed to let users feel free air sensations in the physical world without any instrumentation of the user's body. Aerial enhances a user's perception of virtual 3D elements by creating physical forces the user can feel in free air. To create a free air sensation, Aerial uses compressed pressure fields in the form of a vortex ring.
So that's sort of cool, shooting these little smoke rings or whatever at you, and you can kind of feel them. And that's pretty neat, but the problem with it is it works okay for floating soccer balls. It can't be interrupted, but there's a latency, right? The latency for it to shoot a smoke ring over to hit your hand looks like it's about, I don't know, 300 milliseconds, something like that. And that's problematic because we know good user interfaces, you want everything needs to respond within 100 milliseconds, and this will be a little slower than that. And touch-based interfaces, really they want to be even better than that. So that thing's pretty cool, but I don't know if it's quite going to get there. Now some people are taking it another direction. Like the Airborne Ultrasound system is similar to the Aerial, except it uses ultrasound that comes from this thing, and it goes to your skin, and you can feel textures and patterns with this kind of collapsing ultrasound waves on your hand. And that's cool because it's way faster. You don't have that lag. It's happening instantly. It sort of freaks me out a little, you know, like, oh, sorry, we collapsed those. Was that your heart muscle? I'm sorry. You know? I'm still a little skeptical about whether that's really going to be what people want, because there's a lot of ways you can fake touch, but man, like touching real things is just, you can't, there's no substitution for it. Now we've seen, you know, the Kinect come into the home. The Kinect was the fastest selling peripheral in the whole history of everything. It hasn't been vastly successful in terms of integrating it into standard gameplay, but like 1 out of 3 Xbox owners has a Kinect. And some of the games are really good for that. Whether the games are great or not is one thing, but the fact that they sold so many and so fast tells you that the world has an appetite to want to immerse themselves more physically into their games. It's something people want. Whether this thing is really delivering on it is another question, but it's something that the world is very interested in. Now, people ask a lot, when are we going to have robots in the house? I've been waiting for 30 years for robots to be in the house, and the question is, when are they going to show up and why? Many people think, oh, they're going to come and do household tasks. Robots are going to make your bed, and robots are going to do your dishes. And I don't think that's true, because usually we don't buy new technologies to do things that we can already do. We buy new technologies to do something that couldn't be done before. And I am beginning to have an idea of how robots are going to show up in our house. I think they're going to play patty cake with us. Okay? Not actual patty cake, but something that will look a lot like patty cake. This video kind of gives a sense of what I am talking about.
When it detects hitting my sword like this, it will recoil and move to the beginning of the next attack motion.
So it's one thing this dude kind of sitting here playing sword fight with this robot. But imagine a different situation where he's wearing an HMD and he can't quite see the robot that's there. So here's my little vision of how I think patty cake robots are gonna go down. You're there at home, you've got your HMD, you've got your little treadmill, of course, you have those things, naturally. And of course you have your very friendly looking patty cake robot. And you're kind of going up in the world and you're like, whoa, what is this wall? And he's got this brick wall here. And it's got a Kinect type thing, so it knows where your hands are. So it doesn't need a whole wall. It just needs a piece of a wall that it moves to kind of be where your hand is. So you can be feeling your way around the environment, and he's just moving the wall, and you're like, wait, here's the wood part. He's like, okay, I got a wood piece, I'll just bring this over. And why wouldn't he have just a little collection of like little props and things that he could bring up to kind of let you feel the actual world? And some of them, you know, you'd be like, oh, what's this axe? And there it is on the table, and he puts it, he's holding it in the right place on the table, and you pick it up, and he lets go of it. Now you've got this axe, and you're waving it all around, right? And then, oh, here comes the dragon. He's breathing fire, and he's got like a hairdryer. This sounds crazy, but I think it's just the kind of crazy that gamers like. I'm really starting to believe that something like this is probably going to start to happen and not too far away. But it's all contingent on whether people really do want HMDs in their home. Because the part that's cool about it is once you can start to involve the whole touch system into your games, it's going to give a level of immersiveness that I think we haven't seen before. So, because it is something people want, right? They want to be able to reach out and touch the worlds. You know, it's great to look at worlds, but to be able to reach out and really just touch them I do think it's something people really want. And I don't think people look at the iPad and say, yep, there it is. We're going to be using this device for the next 30 years. And I say, I don't know. I think we're kind of in this middle place where touch computing has just sort of shown up. And I think we're going to see continue to change and evolve. And I really do think that we're going to have this new relationship with our technology. I think we're going to be getting into a thing where not only are we reaching out, to touch our interfaces, but I think very soon they're going to be reaching back to touch us. Thank you.